Andy Wheeler here from CrimeDe-Coder, making this video today as I wanted to show off one of the recent web maps that I put on my site. It's a little bit too dense to go over all the different functionality I put into that in a simple GIF. So wanted to make a short video, talk about some of the cartographic decisions that I made for that particular map, and illustrate the type of work that I can do for, if you're a police agency, I can do that, build you those same types of data visualizations, or a lot of different think tanks and nonprofits are reaching out to me for similar work as well. So first, I have up on here my website in an incognito browser so you can see how fast and how functional everything is. It's not due to caching or anything like that. But if you go up to my navigation bar, so you can look at you can go to the store to look at my recent book or contact page. But in content, if you go down to demos, then you can see all these different web demonstrations that I put onto my site. I may do other videos to show some of those off, but today, scroll down and we're going to check out this interactive hotspot map that I made with public data from Durham PD. And so I'm not doing any projects with Durham PD right now, but this is just an example from open source data online to sort of demonstrate the capabilities of what I can do. And I've been essentially building my own personal crime analysis Python library to help me out with a bunch of different projects that I'm doing. And so I wanted to show this off, talk a little bit about the technology underneath the map and the cartographic decisions that I made for it. I really like doing these slippy maps, and the technology underneath this particular mapping application is called Leaflet. And Leaflet is an open source JavaScript library to do these nice slippy maps. You can zoom in and navigate on the particular maps. And so I've built a lot of tools using a Python library that essentially builds out the nice JavaScript leaflet maps. And the Python library is called Folium for those interested. And I have other resources on my personal andrewpwheeler.com blog as well that goes into a lot of the tech details of that. But one of the reasons I really like these maps is because it just bundles them in a single file. So everything here is just in a single HTML file. I could literally email this Durham Hotspots map. If I'm building maps for a police department or whoever, I can email those. It's easy to put online to share with individuals. And so they work out really well as web dashboards that are free and cheap. And so in particular, a lot of the common technology now, such as Power BI or Tableau dashboards, they have pretty mediocre maps. And so learning a bit of Leaflet, I think, is definitely a good use of folks' time if they're making public web dashboards to share around, to illustrate these particular crime patterns, or really anything that you need to show in a geographic map. And so as you can see here, I've built a bunch of custom code to make a nice legend over here on the right in the layer controls. And now up on the map by default, it shows these. This is the number of foot patrols in 2023 based on calls for service data in Durham. And these pink blobs are violent hotspots made using a dbScan algorithm that I've talked about a bunch in blogs and everything like that. So won't belay those or won't go over those in particular detail here, but refer you to some of the other resources that I've put up on my website so far. But I wanted to show off some of the little extra touches I've done in this particular map. So with Leaflet, you can go and turn on, turn off layers. One of the things I really like is that I typically use this default gray base map. It's a CartoDB base map, and so you can see the streets and see where everything is. But one of the things that I've done is that you can make polygons, when you hover over them, transparent. So you can see the outline of the hotspot, but you can still zoom in and see what's going on for that particular location. And you have the ability to change the background base map. And so the OpenStreetMap base map tends to have a little bit more information. And so you can pretty much go down, hover over it. You can see that there's a library down here in this particular hotspot. And so doing these hotspot analyses, a lot of times that there tends to be specific locations in those areas that it's easy to see. So it may be an area that has a few different motels, or it may be an area that has a problematic apartment complex. Being able to zoom in and then just see the stuff that's in that particular location is a very simple way to do sort of problem-oriented policing, what gives you sort of details about why that particular location may be a hotspot of crime. But when looking at overall patterns, I definitely like using this, the gray base map for that. And so you can see here I've superimposed different violent crime hotspots with the number of foot patrols. One of the things about doing these leaflet maps is that you can see you can arbitrarily change the order of what gets drawn. So if you click something off and then click it back on, it'll get drawn on the top. So here you can see I can do this for the violent hotspots of crime as well. So now that they're superimposed back on the top. And with this, you can pretty much see how it lines up whether there's foot patrols where there's hotspots of crime, or you can see where there's no foot patrols but there is a hotspot of crime. So you can see up here, I draw no polygons if there haven't been any foot patrols in that particular location. Now, my internal library that I've been building, you can basically put information into these polygons, or I'm going to show points as well, that you can click on them and you can get pop-ups. So here we can see not only the total numbers of foot patrols that were in those 2023 calls for service, but I put in a nice little table that shows the total number. Over here, there's not very many foot patrols, but there end up being directed patrols, which I assume is like a vehicle patrol in that particular area. And also as well, you can pretty much put anything that's valid HTML into those particular pop-ups. So I show here for the hotspot. Now hotspots tend to be it's very arbitrary what you define as a hotspot, but in my experience, they tend to do a hotspot for one type of crime tends to have a bunch of different types of crime in there. So I like by default doing hotspots for all different violent crimes. So you can see here that this particular hotspot has a bunch of aggravated assaults, bunch of robberies, and a few different weapons offenses, no homicides. But also as well, I put in a little graph here. And so like I said, you can put in any valid HTML in these pop-ups. And so you can, I've written an underlying Python library that takes those matplotlib plots, turns them out into an SVG, and then you can insert them nicely here. So this shows the hour of the day for this particular hotspot. You can go through and click in pretty much all of them. You can see that this one has more of afternoon patterns. And so I have those for all of the different hotspots. This one has more of an elevated number of incidents right at midnight. And so that's an example with a line plot for those particular graphs, but it could be anything. So it could be like that day of week heat map that people like to do. It could be more longer term patterns, so not hour of the day, but say the total number of crimes per month over time. You could really put in whatever type of chart, as long as it's a valid HTML element in there. So one of the last things I want to show is I've put different point markers on this map as well. So one of the things I put on here is schools. And here I've done sort of the traditional balloon marker that's common for points. But you can really use any SVG to display that you want. So if you wanted to like, for the heart calls that I'm going to show and talk about in a minute, if you wanted to use a literal heart, you would be able to do that. But here, one of the examples for the schools that I've shown is you can do, instead of the pop-ups I was showing, you can't really see on the video, but I'm clicking those. For schools, I have it as hover text. So you just hover over it and then you get that, the particular school pops up. And so again, that could be any valid HTML. So you could have the hover text show graphs as well. It tends to be a little bit busier, but because if you have these dense point patterns and walking around the map, they kind of get in your way. But that's a simple thing to if the interaction requires, it makes more sense to just have that hover pop up, have that hover instead of needing to click to get that pop up text. I've built an internal library to do that. The last example that I want to show is what are called clustered markers in Leaflet. And so if you zoom out and show the schools, it's a very dense sort of graph, so it's hard to see any particular patterns. A lot of the different tools now use kernel density maps to show areas where it has a very dense number of points. But to me, they don't tend to look very nice, especially in the default applications in Power BI and in Tableau. They tend to use inappropriate sort of rainbow scales and tend to look blobby. Don't let you control the kernel size for the kernel density, and so to me they tend to look pretty bad. One alternative to that using Leaflet are what are called clustered markers. And so clustered markers, instead of showing the total number of schools in this example, ends up being around 200 for the heart calls in Durham in 2023, which these are Durham's alternative mental health responders. They have over 2,000. So if I just plop those 2,000 points on the map, it would just be really dense and inscrutable. What cluster markers does is it only shows if you have multiple markers in a particular small location, it only shows, it clusters them into this little circle. And so you can see when I hover over that, you get the area that shows the polygon, the alpha hole that shows, or the convex hole, I should say, that shows where all those particular points are. You zoom in and then it splits out almost instantaneously. And so you can go and keep on zooming in until in the end you get an individual point. And so here I don't have any additional pop-ups for the heart calls, but you could do a hover text or pop-up the same for those. One of the things is, let me see if I can find an example. When you have points on a map, when they're at the exact same point, so if there was two schools that were at the exact same point, they would have been superimposed on each other, and I would have only been able to click and interact with one of those. One of the nice things about these cluster markers, if I can find a particular example here quick, is that they have this spider output. And so here you can see this particular location had 2 events. And so once you go down and zoom on it for the full way, it spiders those out. So I could click on the individual pop-up for those 2 incidents. And so this is just a really nice example of being able to superimpose a lot of information on a singular map. I'm not saying that I did this mostly as an illustration, so I didn't have any particular data analysis in mind, but this should be illustrative of the different types of things that you can do with these different types of leaflet maps. And so, like I said, I think it's really great resource for analysts to learn, to be able to make maps that they can share with others. Like I said, you can put this on a simple static website. It's just served as a single HTML file with all the data embedded. Or you could even just email this HTML file and it just opens up for individuals on the other end after they download that data. So it's an easy way to share these interactive maps that everybody can go in and check out and look, because you just need a web browser, which pretty much everybody has. Thank you very much, guys. And if folks have questions about this map or other types of web demonstrations that I make, let me know. I may do more videos in the future like this if the reception is good for this. So thank you guys very much.